Chapter 1. The Unexpected Courier. Chris Evans woke up earlier than usual, determined to carry out a rather unusual experiment. Instead of the usual meetings and red carpet events, he put on a courier's uniform and headed to a major music production company. His goal was to get a first-hand glimpse of the team's true atmosphere, where he intended to become a co-owner, yet remain anonymous, seen only as an ordinary delivery guy. Arriving at a small shipping office, Chris presented his special agreement with the management. They allowed him to work for one day as a regular courier, with staff sworn to secrecy. People there stared with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. It wasn't every day a famous actor volunteered to push a cart full of boxes. But Chris only wanted one thing: to see how people behaved when they believed him to be a mere delivery worker. A towering gray corporate building greeted him with the cold gleam of metal and glass. By the service entrance stood a modest door marked "Staff and Couriers Only." Chris pushed it open and stepped into a dimly lit corridor, where a security guard barked at him. "Hey, let me see your pass." The guard clearly wanted to dismiss the unknown figure as quickly as possible. Chris showed his paperwork and named the department expecting the delivery. Reluctantly, the guard let him in, warning him not to get in anyone's way. Heading toward the elevator lobby, Chris noticed several employees in expensive suits. One, spotting the dark blue uniform, wrinkled his nose and deliberately stepped aside. Another grumbled just loud enough for Chris to hear. Why's he dragging himself along like that? Apparently, around here, people considered their time more important than his. Chris merely gave a slight smile. He'd seen how attitudes can change once people find out who he really is. But for now, as a courier, he was treated coolly. When the elevator doors opened on the designated floor, a sign read, "VIP Client Services Department." The interior was luxurious, all glass partitions and glossy desks. Everything looked immaculate. The moment Chris stepped forward, he nearly bumped into a stern woman in a business suit. She glanced at the cart, almost sneering. "Are you sure this delivery is for us?" Chris handed her the delivery note, explaining the order details. She grudgingly nodded and showed him where to go, keeping her distance as though afraid her immaculate jacket might get soiled. In the corridors, employees were deep in conversation, discussing upcoming projects or complaining about a looming deadline. But whenever Chris came closer, the chatter paused, and everyone's attention turned to the delivery guy. Their looks were sometimes condescending, sometimes merely curious, like they couldn't fathom why someone like him would dare enter their prestigious space. Chris listened keenly to snatches of conversation, trying to gauge how pervasive this dismissive attitude was within the company. Eventually, he reached a large office where a young receptionist sat behind an impressive desk, eyes glued to her phone. She barely looked up. "Leave everything by the wall and don't block the walkway." She signed the delivery papers automatically, as though this were a trivial formality, then returned to scrolling through her messages. She didn't even say thank you. Chris carefully unloaded the boxes, placed them where she indicated, and said goodbye. There was no response. Back in the hallway, Chris noticed a group of clerks whispering about some important shareholder expected in the coming days. One of them shot a sarcastic remark in Chris's direction. "Let's hope this shareholder doesn't show up late like some couriers do." They all laughed, and Chris was quietly amazed. They were waiting for someone important, never suspecting that the very person they anticipated was standing right there, wearing a simple uniform. Soon, Chris returned to the service entrance to his small delivery truck. A warm breeze ruffled his hair, and he exhaled with relief. Outside, he was free from the piercing stares, though he had more deliveries to make throughout the same corporate building, and the scenario would likely repeat itself. Sneering comments, dismissive smirks, a lack of basic courtesy. It grew clear to him that the company needed a serious wake-up call, something more than a token gesture, a genuine overhaul of values. If they treat the people who keep their daily routine running like this, Chris thought, then what must they be like with partners and clients they don't consider elite? He realized that posing as a delivery man had revealed truths that glossy reports and presentations never would. Chris decided to continue this experiment to gather evidence. In a few days' time, he planned to reveal his identity at a company-wide meeting, letting everyone see that the courier they ignored was, in fact, that important shareholder. And perhaps, once confronted with the truth, They would grasp the notion that a person's value is determined not by their status, but by their actions and their capacity to treat others with respect. This was the first step on the path of change that Chris was intent on bringing to this haughty yet promising company. Chapter 2. Behind the Grand Facade. Chris Evans once again pulled up to the service entrance, that realm of echoing corridors and gray walls where employees scurried about their daily tasks. Through the main lobby, only the chosen seemed to pass, while people in courier uniforms had to enter through a side door, trying to remain unnoticed. Early that morning, Chris had already made a few deliveries and had observed a common theme. If you wore a uniform, most saw you as just another fixture, or sometimes a convenient target for frustration. His truck was loaded with boxes for various departments. Clutching the delivery documents, Chris walked down a hallway and ran into the same security guard as before, who glanced right past him, as if a courier mattered far less than those in expensive business suits. While Chris fished out his paperwork, the guard wordlessly turned away and curtly signaled that Chris could proceed, as though the man wasn't worthy of even a good morning or thank you. En route to the elevators, Chris overheard two women conversing near a water cooler, sneering in his direction and griping about constant delays and sluggish delivery workers. They spoke loudly enough for Chris to catch every word. He adjusted his cap and feigned indifference, well aware that these small manifestations of arrogance were part of a larger pattern, one he intended to break. The elevator door slid open to reveal a few employees immersed in talk about an upcoming meeting. Hearing references to a major investor and a priority partner, Chris smirked inwardly. They were actually expecting him, but no one suspected that their courier was the one poised to invest. The elevator stopped on the 12th floor, home to the analytics department. People rushed by with folders and flash drives, fatigued expressions betraying the strain of a looming deadline. At the reception desk, Chris recognized the same intern who'd helped him with paperwork earlier. The young man spotted him and nodded, relieved to see at least one friendly face. Before Chris could speak, a stern-looking woman, apparently a department manager, strode up, whispered something to the intern, and sent him scurrying back to his desk. Her cold gaze made it clear that she wanted the courier gone, no questions asked. Chris simply handed her the delivery forms, indicating he had brought the requested equipment. The woman signed without so much as a glance, tossing over her shoulder. "Leave the boxes over there. We'll sort them out ourselves." After the intern did a quick check of the order, Chris wheeled his cart down the corridor. He was stopped by a group of analysts, weary and tense, who paid no mind to the delivery boy. One of them, eyes glued to charts on his tablet, brusquely asked, "Everything arrived on schedule? We need this data, like, now." Chris assured him that the delivery matched the order, but they offered no response, too engrossed in their tasks. He set down the boxes, confirmed delivery, and headed back to the elevator, giving the intern a discreet nod in thanks. The intern quietly wished him a good day. His next stop was marketing, up on the 14th floor. Stepping out of the elevator, Chris entered a space bright with colorful posters encouraging people to think creatively. Yet at the sight of a man in a uniform, some employees instantly lost their veneer of cheerfulness. One manager, stylish in a modern blazer, approached Chris. "We're having an important briefing. Please keep it down." Her emphasis made it sound as though Chris might start banging boxes around in the middle of their meeting. He just smiled, promising to be quiet, then carefully wheeled the cart to a designated spot. After he finished, the manager spoke curtly. "Where are the documents? Let me sign." Without looking up, she scribbled her signature and went right back to scrolling through her tablet, not offering so much as a simple "thank you." Chris took it in stride. It was just another test of how friendly this office truly was. Finally, he headed 3 floors higher to the IT department, where things proved to be very different. The open space was lined with laptops, rows of servers, and walls covered in posters of guitars and pop stars. As soon as Chris entered, he was greeted by a tall guy in a company logo t-shirt. Realizing the delivery had arrived, he brightened. "Awesome. We've been waiting for these headsets. We can't finish sound testing without them." He even shook Chris's hand and helped unload the boxes, adding with genuine warmth, "You're right on time. Appreciate it." This relaxed atmosphere surprised Chris in a good way. Not only did they not give him disdainful looks, but a couple of coworkers came over to check if everything had arrived in good condition. After Chris finished the paperwork, a woman in her early 40s, evidently the team lead, approached with a smile. "Thank you for bringing the shipment all the way up here. If there's any confusion or if you need more signatures, just come straight to us. No need to deal with HR." Her sincerity left Chris feeling truly welcome. Here, he realized, the mindset seemed much friendlier compared to the preceding floors. It was proof that not the entire company was mired in arrogance. Some teams still valued anyone's contribution. Heading back to the ground floor, Chris leaned against a wall near the service exit and closed his eyes for a moment. In just half a day, he'd encountered two extremes: people who flaunted their status and those who, despite deadlines and stress, retained their humanity. Reflecting on all he'd seen, Chris pulled out his phone and messaged the assistant who was coordinating his undercover deliveries. Learned a lot. Still observing. Beneath the corporate glamour and sleek facade, real tension simmered, rooted not in professional expertise but in snobbery, in the habit of judging others by a uniform. He'd witnessed how the very same organization could harbor such vastly different attitudes. Deep down, Chris grew more convinced that the upcoming shareholders' meeting would be a watershed moment. Those unwilling to respect every employee, no matter their role, would likely find it hard to stay on top. Tucking his phone away, Chris adjusted his cap again and pushed open the door leading out to his truck. He knew that more deliveries lay ahead, more floors to visit, and the ultimate surprise, when he finally revealed his identity. But he already sensed how badly the company needed real change. Most importantly, he knew there were people who would eagerly join him in making it happen. Chapter 3: The Invisible Owner. Chris Evans shut the door of his truck, taking a few seconds to mentally replay the day's events. He'd now visited various departments, witnessing shifting attitudes toward the man in the courier's uniform, ranging from icy disregard to friendly cooperation. Behind the building's polished facade and this prosperous corporate image, cracks were evident in how employees interacted with one another. No one suspected that the new investor was already wandering their halls in plain sight, disguised as a lowly delivery man. Feeling a swirl of emotions, frustration, intrigue, a touch of satisfaction, Chris started the engine and drove slowly toward the building's spacious parking lot. Curious to view the surroundings as an ordinary worker might, inside the courtyard lay a tranquil scene: neat flower beds, clean walkways, a couple of benches. Now and then, an employee walked by on the phone, barely noticing the courier behind the wheel. Chris parked among the delivery trucks, slipped on a jacket, and strolled along the building's facade, gazing up at the broad glass windows. Inside, he glimpsed the glow of computer screens, high-end furniture, and serious faces, none of which had any clue that this famous actor and partial owner was standing just outside. At that moment, Chris decided to call Grigory Seryogin, the only person who knew his true status. They had agreed that Chris would study the company from within, then meet with top management to plan next steps. But before Chris could dial, he spotted a brisk young man with a managerial air stepping out of the service entrance. Based on his name badge, this was Marcus, the head of human resources. "Hey, you," Marcus called out, scanning Chris's uniform. "You're the courier who's been roaming around all day?" Chris felt a slight tension in his chest but remained calm. "Yes, I have a few deliveries left. Need to hit multiple departments to drop off equipment and documents." Marcus looked him up and down. "I've noticed you peering at the building. This isn't a tourist site. Finish your job and get out. We don't need random people hanging around outside." His tone spoke of arrogance, the attitude of someone convinced of his own importance. Chris gave a polite nod, indicating he'd be on his way. But Marcus lingered, seemingly expecting more of an explanation. "Another thing, all staff must wear badges. You don't have one. If you've got a temporary pass, show it to security. Don't make me track you down later for being here without ID." Chris kept his composure. "Of course. I have a card from security. I can show you if you'd like." "Whatever," Marcus waved him off. "Just watch it next time. I hate dealing with hassles." Watching him leave, Chris felt a twinge of frustration. The head of HR, supposedly the one who should grasp the value of human relations, was talking down to a worker fulfilling a crucial logistical role. No one knew that the real co-owner was standing right in front of them, merely dressed differently. Climbing into the truck, Chris finally rang Grigory. The familiar voice on the line gave a hint of a smile. "How's the day treating you? Had enough already?" "I've seen quite a lot," Chris replied. "Different departments, different personalities. Some are genuinely friendly and open, like the people in IT or a couple of interns, while others are downright unpleasant, like the head of HR. Grigory sighed. I hear you. People like him can be barriers to real progress. Official reports say everything's great, but in reality, he suggested meeting at a nearby cafe to discuss Chris's findings in peace, then decide when Chris would make his status public. The actor agreed, promising to come at the arranged time. Still, Chris had a few more deliveries to finish, so he went back into the service hallway with the necessary paperwork. En route, the security guard blocked his way again. Look, I hear you've been visiting a lot of departments. You done yet? Not quite, Chris answered calmly. I have some documents to deliver to contract signing. You can check my list if you want. The guard yawned, waving him on. Fine, do what you have to do, but don't linger. Taking the elevator up to a lavishly decorated department where major deals got finalized, Chris found an office hush, with people poring over paperwork. As soon as he walked in, a woman in a gray suit gave him a distinctly unwelcoming look. And who do you need? He repeated the manager's name from his documents. She frowned. Wait here, he's in a meeting. A minute later, a tall man with a stern expression emerged from a glassed-in conference room. Chris passed him the relevant paperwork, which the man barely glanced at before handing it off to his secretary. Handle it. Without so much as looking at the courier, the man went back to his meeting. The secretary sighed, signed the forms, and told Chris, You're all set, good day. The sense of being treated like an expendable cog only grew stronger. These people saw him merely as part of the workforce, not a real person. Chris returned to the elevator, catching a glimpse of his reflection in the mirrored walls, a uniformed courier, someone no one recognized as the movie star they might have admired under different circumstances. He had no regrets. Only by playing this role could he gather honest facts about the company's environment. Back in the parking lot, Chris paused beside his truck, pondering his approaching meeting with Grigory. They needed to go through each incident, the rudeness, the apathy, and the scattered moments of kindness, everything that would shape their next steps. Soon, Chris would reveal his true identity, not just an actor passing through, but a new co-owner determined to reshape the corporate culture. How will these people react once they know the truth? He wondered, gazing at the imposing building and the employees walking past. Perhaps some would try to flatter him, hoping to avoid repercussions for their behavior, while others might see it as a chance to form sincere relationships. Chris had no interest in punishing or belittling anyone. He believed the changes he intended to implement could uplift everyone who truly respected others. Starting the truck, Chris peered into the rearview mirror, catching sight of the building's silhouette behind him. His experiment was nearing its climax. Soon there would be a high-level meeting where he'd reveal himself. People would learn the humble delivery man in the blue uniform could make major decisions, meaning their arrogance would no longer go unchecked. He pressed the accelerator and headed downtown to meet Grigory, feeling a mix of tension and anticipation. The moment of truth was drawing close, when he would show that a real leader's authority isn't built only on finances, but on recognizing the worth of every individual, from interns to veterans of the corporate world. The invisible owner would soon become visible to all. Chapter 4. The Revelation. Chris Evans parked near a small cafe 2 blocks from the corporate building. He had arranged to meet Grigory Seryogin there to finalize details for the upcoming shareholders' meeting. The instant he walked in, the warm scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon greeted him. Only a few customers were scattered around, each occupied with their own thoughts. In the corner, behind a wooden table, Grigory was typing on his laptop. He stood upon seeing Chris, shook his hand, and gestured toward the seat opposite him. Have a seat, he said. Getting used to the courier role yet? Chris smirked, removing his cap and settling back in the chair with relief. Oh, definitely. I've seen a lot they never show in official reports. Some employees are genuinely helpful. Others act blatantly arrogant. But none of them realize who I really am. Grigory gently closed his laptop and set it aside, sipping at his lukewarm cappuccino as though mustering the right words. Then, lowering his voice, he asked, So, have you run into Marcus, our HR director? What do you think of him? Marcus made the worst impression, Chris admitted. He's constantly trying to flaunt his authority, checking why I wander the halls so long, scolding me for not wearing an ID badge. You can practically feel him radiating self-importance. Grigory nodded in understanding. He's not the only one. Many department heads throw their weight around without realizing how rude it comes across. They think because they're responsible for results, they have the right to look down on lower-level workers. The problem is, that's become a habit. Chris took a sip of water from the glass on the table, frowning. I'm convinced the company needs systemic change. People respect only those they deem useful or high status. But a courier's job is just as crucial as any other, not to mention the basic decency everyone deserves. Exactly, Grigory agreed. We have a few young specialists, interns, like that guy in analytics, who treat others kindly. But then you've got senior colleagues forever emphasizing their higher rank. Sometimes I feel like I'm a courier myself, trying to connect different departments and running into the same lack of understanding. Chris gazed out the cafe's big window at the pedestrians rushing by. He thought back to the chilly stares in the halls, the obvious disdain toward a delivery man, and how different it felt in IT, where he was received warmly. A tug-of-war churned in his chest, part resentment, part desire to help. All right, he said at last. I think it's time I show them who I am. If I keep hauling boxes, these people will just carry on as they are. I want to officially announce that I've bought a stake in this company. It's about time everyone learns the simple courier is actually a co-owner. Grigory nodded, lowering his voice further. We can set the shareholder meeting for the day after tomorrow. We'll gather the key figures, division heads, department managers, top execs. First, the current CEO will speak, then you'll go on. Usually, they expect a foreign investor or some big Hollywood partner. But you can show up in your blue courier uniform, just imagine the reaction. You mean literally walk on stage dressed as the courier? Chris asked skeptically. Precisely. At first, people will think you wandered in by mistake. Then, when you announce you're one of the owners, they'll realize how wrong they were to judge a person by appearance. For a moment, Chris closed his eyes, picturing the scene. He recalled Marcus's icy tone, the stinging remarks from managers, the guards' indifference. His heart skipped imagining the look on their faces. Still, Chris didn't just want to put them in their place. He hoped it might make them reassess their attitudes toward others. It's a bold plan, he said finally, but I'm in. Let's do it. Just make sure no one catches wind beforehand, or it'll spoil the surprise. Grigory smirked. Don't worry, I'll handle it. I'll notify only the CEO so security doesn't bar you from entering. I'll say we have a special surprise for the staff. Everyone else will figure it out in the moment. What do you think happens next? Chris asked. How many will genuinely change, and how many will just suck up to the big man? My guess is, some will sincerely realize their behavior was wrong, Grigory replied, idly spinning his coffee cup. Others won't change. They'll pretend to welcome you but still insist hierarchy is everything. Either way, we need to show them an alternative to build a corporate culture where respecting all staff isn't just talk. Chris glimpsed real enthusiasm in the man's eyes. Then we're on the right track. You're no stranger to shakeups, are you? Grigory shrugged. I've worked for a few international companies, implementing new standards. It's tough, but not impossible. We just need an example from the top. Your story will be a powerful message that arrogance holds us back. A waitress approached, smiling, offering dessert. Chris ordered a slice of chocolate cake. Grigory asked for another coffee. They sat quietly for a moment, each lost in thought. Chris was mulling over everyone he'd encountered these past days. The intern who helped without question, the friendly folks in IT, the marketing manager who treated the courier like a nuisance, and Marcus, who wouldn't even look closer to see who stood before him. All right then, said Grigory when the waitress returned with their order. We'll finalize the meeting for the day after tomorrow afternoon. I'll book the official event hall on the top floor. Directors, major department heads, key staff, they'll all be there. You'll roll in with your cart, claiming you've got an urgent delivery. Grigory arched his brow playfully, and then reveal your true role. Chris imagined the entire scenario, feeling his pulse quicken. This wasn't some movie script. It would have real consequences for a lot of employees, shaping the future of the company. But he knew if not now, then when? Staying invisible served no further purpose. Fine, he said. We'll bring the curtain down, unveil the plot twist, and see who's ready to join the new chapter. Exactly, Grigory nodded. Think of it like a dress rehearsal for real change. They chatted more casually after that, with Grigory telling amusing tales about how certain managers boasted of their infallibility, and Chris admitting that, at times, he felt like a transfer student awkwardly trying to learn the ropes of a foreign class. Still, he recognized how urgent and essential this mission truly was. When they finished dessert, both men stood. Chris paid the bill, and they walked out, where a gentle breeze ruffled their clothes. Grigory gripped his hand, repeating, Don't worry, it won't be easy, but it'll go as planned. The surprise factor is everything." Chris smiled in return, feeling relief wash over him. The hardest part lay ahead, publicly asserting his ownership and explaining why a well-known actor would take it upon himself to introduce new standards in the unfamiliar world of music production. Yet he believed that combining his creative vision with solid business practices could transform the company from within. He recalled how, back in his youth, he dreamed of building a place where people respected each other without obsessing over titles. Now he had a real chance to make that dream a reality. "All right, see you in 2 days, then," said Grigory. "You still have errands, right?" "Yep," Chris confirmed. "But I'm wrapping up my courier shift. Time to fully embrace my role as co-owner." They shook hands and parted ways. Chris glanced back at the cafe, softly lit in the evening glow, thinking of how the next meeting would take place in a boardroom full of managers who had looked down on him. Soon they would learn that the delivery guy they scorned was part of the company's future. Then they'd have no choice: adapt or leave a stage that no longer condoned arrogance. Thus began the final stage of a crucial production. The sudden arrival of an actor-turned-investor prepared to spark a revolution in the company's culture. Chris Evans was resolute in taking center stage for this performance of truth. Chapter 5, Turning Point. Morning dawned on the day of the highly anticipated shareholders' meeting, and the building's top-floor conference hall filled with employees from every department. Tension buzzed in the air as rumors circulated about a mysterious new partner. No one knew who to expect. Some suspected someone from Hollywood. The CEO welcomed everyone from the stage, announcing the imminent arrival of the individual who will play a vital role in the company's future. People looked around, expecting a commanding figure in a custom suit. Then the doors at the back of the hall flew open, and in walked the courier, the same man in the blue uniform that employees had glimpsed hustling around. Amid countless bewildered stares, he rolled a cart toward the stage. A murmur swept the room. "What's he doing here? Will security escort him out?" But instead, the CEO simply nodded, indicating all was well. The courier parked his cart by the microphone, removed his cap, revealing Chris Evans. A hush fell. Chris introduced himself as the new co-owner, explaining how he deliberately posed as a delivery man to see firsthand how ordinary staff were treated. He noted that many people in the firm were warm and professional, though some looked down on others. His words were a call to action. "It's crucial that we learn to respect every colleague, regardless of title or rank. It's not about buzzwords. It's about how we act day to day." The CEO confirmed that Chris had officially acquired a significant share of the company. Grigory Seryogin, the top manager who had organized the undercover experiment, stepped forward with a presentation on the new culture of transparency, support, and equality. At first, the audience was thunderstruck. This mere courier was, in fact, a famous actor holding real power over their future. Those who had treated him coldly the day before realized they had misjudged their own importance. Some broke into relieved smiles at the prospect of a friendlier atmosphere. Others looked embarrassed, recalling their harsh words. Chris urged everyone to embrace reform, aiming to make the company not only financially successful, but also genuinely welcoming from within. He pointed to folders of a concise improvement plan. "You'll all find ideas here on how we can work together with mutual respect for the greater good." An excited buzz ran through the hall. Some apologized to Chris for how they treated him. Others enthusiastically grabbed the documents to get started. The underlying lesson was clear: you can't judge a person based on uniform or job title. And Chris, now fully revealed as a co-owner, made it known that real changes were coming, changes that would affect everyone. People milled about, talking in hushed or animated tones. Some staff, particularly those who had recently felt belittled by coworkers, seemed hopeful that the new policies would break the ingrained hierarchies. In the meantime, a handful of managers were visibly unsettled, remembering their dismissive remarks to the courier, who now had actual influence. In closing, Chris promised to be actively involved, monitoring the company's progress from the inside instead of from afar. He wanted them to see that sincerity and respect really mattered, and that recognizing the worth of every employee was central to lasting success. With that, the great unveiling concluded, and the story took a dramatic turn. Yet this was merely the beginning of the next phase. The company now had to prove, under real pressures and deadlines, that it could uphold these new principles of respect and unity. Chris knew the transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but an essential first step had been taken, and he intended to ensure the momentum continued. Before leaving, Chris slipped on his trusty blue cap one last time, softly reminding himself of how this journey started. If nothing else, he hoped that from this day forward, no one in the company would ever again dismiss someone based on appearances alone. And with that goal driving him, he prepared to guide them all toward a brighter, more respectful future.
If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and motivates us to continue sharing heartwarming, inspiring stories almost every day.